Shall we begin, sir?
Yeah.
KCHR is very happy to welcome all of you to our 7th webinar of the webinar series. And we are very excited to have Professor P.K. Michael Tharagan, Chairman KCHR, who will be speaking to us on how early was the idea of India as a nation, a tentative discussion based on the Malayalam travelogue of 18th century, the Vartamana Pustakam. I request all of you to kindly mute your microphones during the duration of the talk, and also to please type in any queries you have for the speaker in the chat box, which will be taken up after the end of the discussion, at the end of the talk. I request Professor Karthikeyan Nair, Director KCHR, to kindly take over the proceedings. I welcome all of you to this talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Dr. Rachel has pointed out, we are entering or we are celebrating or conducting the 7th webinar in our series. And the peculiarity of this webinar is that it is our Honorable Chairman, Dr. Michael Tharagan, is presenting the lecture. Earlier, our former director, Dr. Sanal Mohan, has had once delivered his speech on a particular subject. Now it is the turn of our Honorable Chairman to have it. And he is discussing on, as Rachel had pointed out, the idea of a nation, how old it is. The idea of a nation as India as a nation, how old it is. And it is also based on a Malayalam prose text, one of the first or early text travelogue in Malayalam literature. Perhaps Malayalam may be in its infancy in the 18th century. Many words or the language used in the text may not be understandable to the present generation of Malayalis. But a student of history or a student of social science can clearly follow it. It is a travelogue to pious priests traveling to Europe via Portugal, Lisbon, and reaching Rome, and they came back. It took almost 8 years to complete their journey. On return, one of them passed away to Goa, and the other man came to Kerala and had written this book, Vartamana Pustakam. But it remained unprinted till the 20th century. Only in the 1970s or 60s that the first edition of the Malayalam book came out. And later some other studies also have come. The latest one, I think, may be the one book presented or prepared by my institute, the State Institute of Languages. Vartamana Pustakatinte Vartamanam. That is the latest book. I think it is the latest book. It is a study on the text. But the content of the book is now different from what our chairman is going to deliver. You know, our chairman is Dr. Michael Tharagan, an expert in economic history of Kerala, especially of Kerala, a former, our vice chancellor of the Kannur University, a fellow of the Center for Development Studies in Trivandrum, and a former lecturer of history or a professor of history in various colleges, especially at Aluva UC College, where he studied also. And he had a number of essays or articles to his credit on economic history, especially on plantations, the labor movement, etc., etc. Here, perhaps he may be dealing with a subject which is entirely different from what he had specialized in as a study. That is, it is study, and it is as research or a going back to the idea of a nation, how the nation is formalized. That is what it is entirely different from economic history. How can a nation be formed? How can an idea be formed? The history of an idea he is searching into or researching into. When this Vartamana Pustakam was written, the authors say that in those days, the whole world was partitioned, divided into 4. Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. The titles they usually is very strange. Asia, Africa, Europa, etc. These are the words they use. But now our understanding of the globe is different, because many more discoveries were conducted and islands were conducted. South Pole and North Pole were explored into, and man explores into every nook and corner of the cosmos, even outside our hemisphere we are looking into or going into. So here Dr. Taragan is searching into the history of an idea, the idea of a nation, and that is with a particular reference to a book. That is a book in prose, Malayalam prose, when Malayalam prose was its infancy. The modern Malayalam prose was infancy in the 18th century, in the second half of the 18th century. So I'm not taking much of your time. We are eagerly waiting to see or hear what Professor Michael Taragan is going to deliver. First of all, I welcome Dr. Taragan, even though it is not only a formality. That's I am the director. Welcome the chairman is a quite strange thing, but as a formality, it's a webinar series. So I welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Similarly, all other participants. We know that all are our permanent participants, I would say. So it's like the permanent members of the UN know, the permanent participants very keenly attended the webinar series. I welcome all of you to have a to attend the meeting and to have a experience of what Taragan is going to. Welcome you all. Thank you, sir. I request Professor Taragan to step into the schools and deliver the lecture.
Thank you, Professor Karthikeyan Nair. You made a mistake in saying that I was a lecturer in Alway Union Christian College. I have an unsolved grudge against the management of that college, my college, that they never gave me a lecturer's position there. I would have been happiest if I had remained as a lecturer there. Anyway, I had 5 years of very interesting and rewarding student days there. So with the permission of Professor Karthikeyan Nair and all my friends, let me discuss, let me present my art of the, let me present my seminar on how early was the idea of India as a nation. Now, the basic question that we are addressing is the question that has the idea of a nation existed for all times, or was it of a later vintage? This presentation addresses this question after making an initial differentiation between idea and concept of a nation. The tentative conclusion we arrive at the end of this presentation is also based upon an evidence gleaned from the 18th century travelogue, the Vartamana Pustakam. The idea of India as a nation, at least as a notion, seems to have existed at that time of, or the time of writing of this travelogue. Even the term of concept of India is found to be very difficult to be used because terminologically it should imply hypothesization or theorization, which are not found in the Vartamana Pustakam. There are two viewpoints from which nationalism is generally understood. One sees it as an ideological construct, while the other as an anthropological concept. If it is an anthropological phenomenon, it can exist without the edifice of a nation state. If it is an ideological construct created in the 19th or even the early 20th century, with the rise of nation states, the material foundations that support its existence are important for its continued existence too. Nigel Harris in 1991 pointed out that the current globalization may result in dismantling of nationalism. To him, protectionism based on nation-state survives with the support of rules and regulations which restrict international migration of workers. As far as the migration of capital is concerned, it can now move anywhere and get invested in any form. If this argument is taken back in history, we reach Harris's own interesting simile that nationalism acquires firm framework only when there is a nation state. Just as love between a couple gets material foundation and objective importance only when it results in the institutionalized framework of marriage. Perry Anderson, probably one of the best known names in this area, in 1991, does not accept that the dismantling of material factors by itself can result in the elimination of nationalism. Once nationalism's basic factor or characteristic, that of forging a common destiny at the level of a nation, is already realized or achieved, it will remain as a material factor, though based on imaginations. This brief survey of literature is meant to illustrate that a search for the idea of nationalism need not be restricted to the period of having the nation state emerging for that region. Any discussion of Indian nationalism, irrespective of ideological or methodological differences, do agree that the origins of nationalist sentiments and courts, which led to the national movement for India's freedom from British colonial rule, emerged in late 19th century. The concurrence is around a date close to 1885, when the Indian National Congress was formed. Even a leading observer like Partha Chatterjee in 1994 agrees with the date, though he mentions pre-1885, again in quotes, nationalist-like movements. That there were idealistic, spiritual, and exclusively cultural attributes of people of the region of India, referred to as Bharatvarsha, Bharat, Bharat Desham, etc., and that they were important is not denied. There were foreign notices of India as Indies, etc., which included places very distant from the present borders and also missing some very obvious parts. Movements of resistance against foreign domination and ideas behind such actions are also not considered in this presentation. That is because they can be very important by themselves, but cannot be analytically viewed along with the anti-colonial political movement and the ideational basis of such a movement. Now let's look at the evidence. The Vartamana Pustakam was written by Paramakal Thoma Kathanar, a Syrian Catholic or Marthoma Christian priest from Keralam, who accompanied a professor of theology, Kariyatil Aussep Malpan, who later was made Archbishop of Kodungalur, on a trip to Rome and Lisbon. They started on their journey in 1778 and came back with the significant loss of by then Archbishop Kariati, who died in Goa in 1786. They went to petition the Pope of the Catholic Church of various problems that the indigenous Christian community or the Catholic community, which stayed loyal to the Pope even while following Eastern Christian or Chaldean church practices. And they were facing these problems. They felt that the European missionaries, especially the Vicar Apostolate, equivalent to the Bishop of Verapoli, that is Verapura, who had by 17th century acquired administrative control over the Syrian Catholics, were treating them not only discriminatingly, but also with outright hostility. This is the immediate historical context of their trip to Europe. There is no evidence to suggest that this volume was originally meant to be a travelogue. It might have been written as a detailed report on what transpired on their trip for the information of church members back home. It is widely believed that there was no other work at that time to be modeled as a travelogue in any Indian language. In Malayalam, there was no non-travelogue in prose. In fact, Paul Manalil in 1999 has rightly challenged the claim that the Vartamana Pustakam is the first travelogue in Indian language. Apart from him, Durga Prasad Bhattacharya in ISI Calcutta has also come up with a serious doubt about Vartamana Pustakam being the oldest travelogue. He, of course, Manalil grants it the position of the first written, but not the first printed or published. It got printed only in 1937 in Kuravilangar. In between, there were different manuscripts available. There was a manuscript which till recently was with a household in Elubina in Alappuzha district, now kept in the St. Thomas Museum in Kakkanad in Ernakulam, which is claimed to be the original manuscript. This manuscript was printed and published in 1977 by Janata Services in Kochi and as edited by Reverend Dr. Thomas Muthed. This presentation is made on this particular version. On page 70 of this, Thoma Kathanar, Paramakal from now onwards, says the following, and the translation is that of the author. When we reached Veerapandian Pattanam, the padre or padri did not receive us appropriately, and that displeased the believers there. After this, the next day, when we started the journey from there, the believers of that place said that the church is ours. The padri failed to receive you, who are also ours, properly because of his wrong birth. That is Janmandra Ked. That is the word that they use, Paramakal uses. And we hope the failure in being received well enough should not be held against us. Whatever that we are able, we will do for you. And further, whatever is to be done is also we are ready to do. This attitude, here the quote ends, this attitude of the believers of the place or church immensely pleased the travelers from Kerala, and Paramakal records, again called, hearing their good-mindedness and request, extreme coolness and happiness was felt. In the style of writing followed by Paramakal, in his manuscript, he reports whatever that happened during their travels in one portion, and in another portion titled Vichara, they are reflected upon. In the Vicharam, he says, again quoting, if what happened here is thought about, how great a matter is Jadi pride will be realized. It is because we were a large group, did not have the paraphernalia generally associated with padres in this area, and arrived like poor people. The padre of the place refused to honor us and caused great distress to the believers of the place. Why did this happen? They, the believers, did not have any earlier acquaintance with us. Neither had we done any great deeds for them. In spite of this, they found that we all belong to the same Jadi, and their hearts were roused by the love or the race. Here the word there Paramakal is using is Varga, of the people of India. That is India Ka. That is why it happened. Now let me offer my own explanation. There is no claim that the Yejubina manuscript is the oldest or that it is the original. There are doubts expressed, and it could be true. Nevertheless, available evidences do indicate that this manuscript could be the oldest. Between the printed versions themselves, for instance, between Muthaden's 1977 version and the English translation of Podipara of 1971, there are differences. The possibility of later additional writings in the printed versions cannot be totally denied. What happened en route to Europe and back are given in the form of a regular diary of events in the Yejubina manuscript. The delegation came back in 1786. The Bhuloka Shastra, a geographical and general introduction to different places, mentions apparently the French Revolution and the assassination of the king and capture of the members of the royal family, which happened later. Therefore, one can come to the conclusion that the Bhuloka Shastram is a later edition. Nevertheless, this latter writing could not have been done much later than the 1790s, since in true journalistic style, it reports the great tumult that happened in France as if it is a current event. The limitations of making a presentation of this nature based upon a work which was written in late 18th century but got printed only after around 140 years cannot be overlooked. If the original version of the Vartamana Pustakam, as it is assumed here, had a portion as indicated earlier, it certainly deserves special attention. It would mean that as early as 1785 to 1790s, there were at least the idea of India beyond the princely state of Tiruvidampur, from where the members of the delegation came. It also suggests that people living outside Tiruvidampur, in this specific case in Veerapandiyan Pattanam, in the present-day Tiruchendur district of Tamil Nadu, and who could not be considered as fellow subjects of the same Maharaja, were considered as fellow Indians. The sentiments discussed are also feelings of one nation, which is distinctly different from that of the Padre, or Padre and Padri is the term that is exclusively used for European missionary priests or generally missionary priests. The Padri is suffering from Janmandra Keda, which can broadly be translated as the wrongness or mistake of birth. Janmandra Keda need not be understood as an attribute to all those who are not born in India. In Vartamana Pustakam itself, there are occasions described in which the members of the delegation from Kerala were received well by other Europeans. At certain places, the doctoral degree certificate of Cariatal was their entry pass. In the particular case of Veerapandiyan Pattanam, a single European missionary did not show expected courtesy to the travelers from Kerala, even though there were priests among them. Of course, there were indigenous Katanas or ordinary priests among them. They felt highly insulted because they needed the hospitality from the Padri, and also due to the fact that they were on a mission to redress the ill treatment that they were receiving from a section of European missionaries. Of course, back in their own home country, home region. The friendly feelings of local people who identified the travelers from Kerala as their own people was based on the fact that they were all Indians or Indiaka. Such an identification must have originated from an idea of India that existed at that time. It is impossible to gauge the physical contours of the region of India, where it began or where it ended. The terms used by Paramakkal in his thought reflection of Vicharam are Jadi, Vargam, and Jadi Mahatmya. Even if Janmandra Keda is added, they're all, of course, cultural terms. Jadi, as used here, does not seems to have the exclusive features of Varna or caste completely, but of course, some smacking of that is there. It is also stated that the people of Veerapandiyan Pattanam, who identified themselves with the travelers from Kerala, had not met each other before. Similarly, Jadi Mahatvam also does not hold aloft the greatness of the author's own people, either by caste or creed. It seems to be indicating the identity of his people, of this people, as Indians. There is one statement of Paramakkal which clearly denotes the contrasting conditions of life practiced by the Padre and the indigenous Katanas. He says that the Katanas did not have the paraphernalia normally associated with the travels of missionaries. From the pages of Paramakkal's own book, we can learn that the missionaries used to travel only by palanquins or manchan or on horseback, attended by, accompanied by other attendants and all that. On the other hand, the travelers from Kerala were more like poor people. This Paramakkal finds as an important reason for the cool reception that he and his team received in the church of Veerapandiyan Pattanam. Here he comes closest to an economic cause for the distinction between the two groups. This could also be when he borders on a conceptualization of the distinction. Yet there is no evidence to prove that he made a clear conceptualization. It looks as if Markel's understanding of India and Indianness remains at that level and were not carried forward to the level of conceptualization. Why I say this would be explained later. He adds that the hearts of the local people were stirred or roused by the love that they felt for fellow members of the same race or varga, who were other Indians or Indiatar. Speculating still, Paramarkel's idea of India had become solid and it had an undefined yet wide geographical dimensions, which covered not only western coast but also the eastern coast of India. His identification of India and Indianness was strongly poised against the European Christian missionaries, whose unjust activities, etc., was mentioned even earlier. Now, to the members of the delegation from Kerala, almost all that they saw and encountered in Europe was new and strange. Periyachal Malpan was an exception because he had been to Europe even earlier. Paramarkel's own words talk of the need to be careful so that they do not get deviated from their mission. They are cautious in dealings with the persons whom they met, and particularly of a person called Caetanos Padiri, a Goan priest who offered his help even unsought. The real name of this person seems to have been, excuse me if I pronounce it wrongly, Cayetanos Vittorio de Faria. It is interesting to note that even a Goan-born, of course of European origins, priest is a padre or a padiri and not a Catalan or Paramarkel. In other words, he is not included in the wide Indian network that the delegation from Kerala have earlier made in Veerapandian Pattanam. Caetanos, we use this name now onwards, was married once, but obviously got separated from his wife and became a priest. His son, Abbe Jos de Faria, who also becomes a priest, was known to Periyachal and Paramarkel. In fact, both father and son are colorful characters and thereby hangs a tale of bewildering dimensions, which I don't have the time and the place to explain. Now, Periyachal made a good impression at least in Lisbon, and was instrumental in gaining almost all that the delegation set out to gain. Finally, he is offered the important position of the Archbishop of Kodungalur. According to Paramarkel, this goes against the wishes of the Caetanos Padri. At least from that point onwards, there seems to be some distancing between the Goan priest and the priest from Kerala. The duo of father and son from Goa returned to their homeland around the same time as the delegation from Kerala. On 10th August 1787, there was an attempt by the Goan elite to conduct an uprising against the Portuguese regime in Goa, called or known as the Conspiracy of the Pintos. The uprising failed, and large number of those alleged to be associated with it were condemned to death or expulsion by the Portuguese. Among the alleged main schemers and participants of the conspiracy was, of course, Caetanos Padri and possibly his son. Abbe Faria, that is his son, There is no trace of the father, who seems to have disappeared after the conspiracy. The son, Abbe Jos de Feria, reappears in France before the French Revolution. Some people think that he has been expelled from Goa. He leads the royalist march. Here he is not a revolutionary, he is a counter-revolutionary, to the French Convention in 1795, which was quelled by no less a person than Napoleon Bonaparte himself. There was a strong belief that the famous French novelist Alexandre Dumas fashioned one of his main characters in the Count of Monte Cristo after him. But many people have disagreed with this rumor. Anyway, he has a history very close to the experiences portrayed in this novel. Around 1811, he became professor of philosophy at Nantes, and styling himself as a Brahmin from India, published his volumes on hypnotism, in which he soon was considered as a pioneer. In 1945, much later, Goa honored him with a statue. By the time the news of the conspiracy of the Pintos reached Portugal, there was considerable suspicion of both the father and the son. They were leading figures of the Goan community in Lisbon. They and their close associates were known to have been advocates of Goans, meaning Goans born of persons of Portuguese origin and not indigenous persons, being placed in positions of authority in administration and in church hierarchy. The demand that some of them were to be considered for important ecclesiastical positions were also widely known. That there were also close acquaintances of Cariatil and Paramakal were also known. The delegation from Kerala, as we have noted earlier, had to wade through the strange world of papal and royal bureaucracy, and that made them depend upon the Goan priests quite a bit, though they had some strong suspicions. They were not so much against the Padruado, that is the system through which the royal government of Portugal could exercise its authority through the Archbishop of Goa, operating over the church in Kerala, but more against the Rome or propaganda appointed Vicar Apostolic of Verapura, or Verapoli as it was pronounced by the foreign missionaries. By late 18th century, Portugal did not have any administrative authority over central Kerala, the stronghold of Syrian Christians. The Portuguese were driven out to mere pockets of control by the Dutch, who were in actual control of most of central Kerala. Paramakal believed that the Goan group also supported the argument that the people of Kerala are not capable of ruling ecclesiastically. He answered this view by bringing in civil administration into the argument. For him, his own king of Tiruvidankur has already proved the abilities of his own people to rule. And of course, Professor Pius Male Kandathil, who is happily with us in this meeting, in talks of, again quoting, rudimentary nationalism in this context. Paramakal's expression of such sentiments seems to be based, again quoting, mostly on issues and institutions related to the domains of the church, where Indians and Indianness should be preferred rather than the Europeans, quote ends. The petition carried by the delegation from Kerala was the expression of an attempt to solve some problems, of course, very basic problems, which existed within a church, not a national or even a regional public prayer. In solving these problems, one of the important suggestions made by the delegation was that a person of their own jati or vargam be placed at the head of the Syrian Christians ecclesiastically, not administratively. A natural choice that could have been suggested was that of Karyatul himself. Nowhere in the Vartamana Pustakam is it mentioned that Karyatul was an applicant for the position of the head of the Syrian Catholics of Kerala. It could have been, of course, it could be guessed that it was a matter of decorum that prevented Karyatul from suggesting his own name. Doubts have been raised that he must have hoped that his own name will eventually be considered. It has to be pure speculation because there's no hard and fast evidences to prove it, as no mention of such a wish is found in this volume. On the other hand, Marthoma VI, the head of the Malangara or Jacobite Church, which group and the Syrian Catholic faction have split with each other, seems to be the candidate of the petitioners under their own petition, under whom these church factions could be united. The fact that the Jacobite and Catholic factions, if they had attempted on this, of course, there is the different and contradictory interpretations, attempted to come together in the 18th century in whatever form, it is, of course, interesting. The attempt did not get realized since Marthoma VI was not welcomed by the Catholic Church completely or totally. A major allegation is that it was due to interference by European missionaries who were afraid that if the Jacobite and Catholic factions of the Syrian Christians were to unite, the superior position that the missionaries had in the church will be lost. Another serious allegation is against Karyatul himself, who is supposed to have manipulated, of course, behind the scenes, against welcoming Marthoma VI into the church. The main evidence is, of course, put forward by those who believe so, is the evidence in favor of this argument is that Karyatul ended up as the biggest gainer, the Archbishop of Kodungalur, with the right to appoint or nominate his successor. Whatever be the veracity of these allegations, almost a century later, in the 19th century, after the gains made by the Carmelite, the Karyatul trip to Europe had faded away, the Syrian Catholic faction had to go in petition again to church authorities outside India. This time they went to the Patriarch of Mosul in West Asia and got a Syrian bishop, Mar Thomas Rokos, sent to Kerala. Their plea was clearly for a bishop of their own right, though right was not the term that has been used, or separate church procedures, which were Eastern Christian, and that he, the bishop, should be able to understand Syriac language. They were not bothered that their bishop should be Malayali or even an Indian. Clearly, the concept of right, I'm using it in anticipation, overrode the consideration of nationality or even regionality. Malakandathil, again in his 2013 article, says on the basis of a reference to the same text of Vartamana Pustakam that this presentation is also based, that Paramakal has written an unpublished work titled India for Indians. He also notes that, and I'm quoting, long before the debates on nationalism shaking the intellectual circles of Europe, Asia, and Africa, Father Thomas Paramakal vehemently argued that foreigners should be kept away from India and that it should be ruled only by Indians. Quote ends. If it is so, Paramakal had certainly gone beyond a mere idea of India to a concept of nationalism, with categorical statements on foreigners, etc. Since I have not been able to see and study this particular document, my views on this are reserved for the time being. Later, Malakandathil also says that, and I'm quoting again, the entire representatives of the St. Thomas Christians under Paramakal, when they met in a Mahayogam at Angamali in 1787, decided to throw away the yoke of the European missionaries and to invite a bishop from West Asia for his episcopal consecration if their request to make Paramakal a bishop was not agreed upon by the Portuguese ruler, who was the ecclesiastical patron under the Padroado system. The rudimentary concepts of nationalism, which I quoted earlier, is still within the ambit of the church. That is Paramakal's concepts. For him, the borders of India is not a limitation to express his national sentiments. Paramakal and his associates are prepared to go to West Asia to find an alternative to the Europeans. Nationalist sentiments could be expressed in any realm, even church or other structures, but in this particular case, the Syrian Christians are expressing it in church terms of right or particular practices within the church only, even after the likelihood of being exposed to other influences. Malakandathil, I'm basing myself upon quite a bit of his work, widens his analysis into nationalist thinking per se by possibly linking up of the possibility of linking up of Cariati's and Paramakal's international experiences with the intellectual fervor created in European academic, religious, and cultural centers by the victory of the American colonies over British colonial power. He points out that various Protestant streams of faith like Congregationalist, Baptist, and Presbyterian churches in America sided with General George Washington and his compatriots and brought out their support through church sermons. Only the Anglican Church took a position in support of Britain. He surmises, that is, Malakandathil surmises, that the spirit of national freedom was certainly carried to Europe along with the charismatic personality of the leader, that is George Washington. Cariati and Paramakal, who spent years close to the American Revolution in European cities, known to be intellectually alive, could not have remained totally ignorant of such developments, as well as the ideas around such movements. The ideas spread by the American War of Independence had really certain similarities with the conspiracy of the Pintos, which took place in Goa in 1787. Some of the Goan priests involved in the conspiracy traveled together with Cariatil and Paramakal by the same ship back to India, according to Malay Kandathil. But Tarakan, not myself, but another Tarakan, in 2009, has doubts about it. Malay Kandathil suggests that the ship had a few days stay in Baja in Brazil in 1785. Basing his views on Antony, that is Philomena Sequeira Antony's study in 2004, he thinks that the Mineiro revolt, which happened in Brazil in 1789, under the inspiration provided by Catholic priests against Portuguese domination, is, and I am quoting, connected with the Indian priests, at least at the inspirational level. Quotes. It is certainly possible that the ideas of the American War of Independence might have played at least at an inspirational role in both Mineiro revolt in Brazil in 89 and the conspiracy of Pindos in Goa in 1787. Both the revolt and the near revolt were led by locally born persons of Portuguese descent, like the American War of Independence was led by descendants of European settlers. The important question is whether Cariatil, who passed away in 1786, or Paramakal had any such inspiration or plan of action. Certainly, it is not mentioned anywhere in the Vartamana Pustakam. The leaders of the failed conspiracy in Goa were priests known by Cariatil and Paramakal in Lisbon. One was Francis Coito, who was earlier the governor of the Padroado Diocese of Kochi. He had interacted with the delegation from Kerala, but was not very helpful always. He was arrested after the conspiracy and was interned in one of the prisons in Portugal, in spite of him claiming lunacy. Another leader was Jose Antonio Gonçalves, who was earlier the administrator of the Archdiocese of Goa. Paramakal has described him, and it's very interesting, and I'm quoting, as a highly intelligent, knowledgeable, and discreet person, Cortez. Gonçalves escaped from Goa to regions controlled by the English East India Company. The news regarding these two Goan priests, who were close acquaintances in Europe, cannot have escaped the governor or administrator of the Archdiocese of Kodungalur, the position occupied by Paramakal till 1799, when he himself passes away. Yet it is not found mentioned anywhere in the concerned work. The conspiracy of Pindos had ambitious aims of allying with Tipu Sultan, who in turn seems to have had plans of receiving support from Napoleon and French forces. We get some insights into the attitude pursued by the Syrian Christians of the times towards Tipu and his rise to peninsular power. The indications that we get is that the Syrians as a community feared Tipu and could have helped the war efforts, and I think they did, of Tiruvidampur and the British against Tipu. Paramakal, as the governor, shifted his residence from Puttanchira, further north of Kerala, to Vadayar near Vaikam in Tiruvidampur. This is supposed to have been to escape from Tipu's impending armies. Along with stories regarding the destruction of churches, of temples, there are also stories of alleged destruction of churches by Tipu. But of course, there are also counter evidences. They all indicate a definite hostility towards the Sultan and his army. Such hostile feelings do not go together with the conspiracy of Pintos in Goa, which had plans to ally with Tipu. Now we come to the summary and conclusion. Vartamana Pustakam does not seem to be the earliest expression of sentiments against the Western domination in India, or even in the region of Kerala. Number of impressive documents resisting Western dominance have emerged, particularly from the north of Kerala. Sheikh Sainuddin Makadam II's Tahwat ul-Mujahideen as perhaps the pride of place among such medieval literature. The call for resistance might have emerged from religious and trade-related issues. There were reasons for conflict between the Portuguese expansionists and the Syrian Christians too, whose interests did not tally with each other always. This conflict was confined mainly to the religious plane, as the Portuguese and the Syrians belonged to the same religion of Christianity, but it got expressed in highly contested differences between divergent church practices of Chaldean, Jacobite, Nestorian, Syrian Catholic, and Latin Catholic persuasions. This conflict, among other reasons, were confined to questions of who is having the authority over the church and appointments to important positions within the church. It never went into open interreligious confrontation as it had happened between the Portuguese and the predominantly Muslim indigenous population. As it is well known, such conflicts in a wider geographical plane have a history going back to Crusades and Ottoman control of Asia Minor. There are evidences going back to the 16th and 17th centuries of conflicts emerging from issues of pepper prices, etc., which were based upon maritime trade practices related to mercantilist policies followed by the Portuguese. Nevertheless, by the time of the writing of Vartamana Pustakam, the conflict seems to have largely confined to difference over rites in anticipation or church practices. The divergent position taken by the Syrian Catholics or Christians remains as an important issue. Even after the exposure of Karyatal and Paremmakal to international scene, where early concepts of nationalism had emerged. Yet on their travel, they came across a concrete human encounter in which sympathy came to them unsought from a group of ordinary people far removed from them culturally, physically, and even linguistically. The real human encounter made them reflect deeply and to realize an idea of nation, of being an Indian. What is especially striking is the fact that these two church dignitaries from Kerala, who sought and got entry into the highest echelons of papal and royal authority, among others, on the basis of the doctoral degree of Karyatal from Urban College in Rome, real acceptance came their way when it was most needed from ordinary people of Vida, Pandya, Pattanam. Paremmakal seems to have shared the fear of his community of Tipu, even while his acquaintances with the priests from Goa and they had plans to ally with the Sultan Tipu. Nevertheless, not much later, in early 19th century, there were open physical conflicts in different parts of Kerala against the expanding British domination led by the Raja of Parashi and the Dalava Kalakulathu Veluthambi supported by Paliyatachan. These conflicts have different histories and also different and even sometimes even contradictory interpretations too. Nevertheless, they share a common facade of anti-Western domination. There are no evidences of any kind to link of link between these uprisings and the idea of a nation, which had already developed at the time of the writing of Vartamana Pustakam. E.J. Hobsbawm, in his well-known Nationalism and Nationalism since 1780, traces the origins of nationalism in late 18th century. Partha Chatterjee also speaks about nationalist-like movements in pre-1885 period. Vartamana Pustakam denotes one such potential incident in the form of an idea of a nation. It occurred in the experiences of representatives of a community which had its own reasons to diverge from some crucial positions that the Western authorities, in this particular case, Western religious authorities, held. Though no more concrete evidence of conceptualization of nationalism can be found in this connection with this early document, it seems a remarkable statement for its times. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Professor Karthikeyan Nair, sir, shall we move on to the question and answer session?
Yes, proceed.
May I request all of you to kindly type in your questions in the chat box. We'll take them up one by one. We have our first question. Professor Michael Tharagan, shall I read out the question?
Yes, please.
It's from Professor Susan Vishwanath. Interesting cusp of histories. Professor, do you know anything about the details of the sea journey they made to South America?
Last sentence, will you repeat?
Do you know anything about the details of the sea journey they made to South America?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much, Professor Susan Vishwanathan, for attending my presentation. Your question, of course, there is a very, very detailed description of the travel across the Atlantic to South America. Of course, their trip itself looks very strange in the sense that they seems to be taking a very difficult route to Europe right from the very beginning, because they take a land route which possibly one could have avoided at that time, probably because they were afraid of interference from some of their opponents, like the missionaries or something. Finally, they get into a Portuguese ship. Of course, the captain was very reluctant to take them, but they finally takes them. First to Cape Africa, and from there go all the way to Baja. Baja is not known anymore as Baja, but some long name in Portuguese language, which I can't memorize. But Baha is fairly well known, at least for history and geography students. And they give a very interesting description of, I think they spend about 20 or 25 days in Baha. And they give a very good description of the Baha and its surroundings. And this is a slight detour, but permit me to make this statement. Long ago, when I was working in the Center for Development Studies, one day a student from France, a Brazilian student, came to meet me, saying that he is working for his PhD in geography, and he wanted to understand the nature of cropping in Kerala, which seems to be very similar to the cropping pattern that his own region in Brazil has. So I asked him which is the region and all that, and back came the reply that he is from Baha. So I told him, don't be surprised, but I can give you an 18th century document which says exactly the same. The similarity between the tree growth in Kerala, almost all gardens in Kerala has small growth, mid height growth, and of course tall growth like coconut. And exactly the same pattern seems to be followed in Baha. So that man was at that time youngster, I forget his name. He was so excited, and he got the whole book translated and took it with him. So I'm saying that there are details available from the Vartamana Pustakam itself.
The next query is by G. Francis. How can we differentiate the reference, quote unquote, Indian as a political entity rather than a geographical entity?
Yeah, that could be a very, very difficult, unless you judge it in context. In one context, India car or Indians or India itself could be a geographical description, and sometimes it could be a political. But in Vartamana Pustakam, in this particular case, I don't think it is a political statement. It is basically talking about a group of people coming from a particular region. In a way, it is a regional or geographical kind of statement. And it doesn't give any political contours or saying that India starts from here and ends there or something like that. It's not given.
The next query is by C.S. Balakrishnan Iyer. What are the historical evidences of destruction of Christian worshipping places in Kerala by Tipu Sultan?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, because there seems to be quite a bit of writing. Most of it is, of course, much later than Tipu's own times. Probably some of it taking after the British writings of the late 18th century, which talks of destruction of number of Christian churches. And I think the last I heard of is by somebody saying that there are 7 churches which has been burned down and all that. I've not come across any serious, probably maybe due to my ignorance, but I have not come across any concrete evidences suggesting that Christian churches has been burnt by Tipu. Probably the greatest allegation, story is that there was this Jesuit college in Ambirakada, or Sambalu, they called it the college at Sambalu, which is supposed, that college itself has been a creation of the Jesuit group, but they got 1,000 acres of land given to them by the Koretti Taimal, who was an important figure in history of the times. He gives this 1,000 acres, and they built that college, where it is supposed to be a college which could be considered to be equivalent to some of the colleges that they were running in Europe. And that college seems not to have worked after Tipu came, Tipu's attack came very nearby, or might have, but in actual destruction, I'm not familiar with the records, so I'm not making any position with regard to that. But then there is a very interesting story of the Saint Sebastian's Church in Kanyur, which is also close by. In Kanyur, that church is still there. It is supposed to be one of the very important churches of the community. But that church, Tipu is supposed to have come with his with army, and the army camped right in front of the church, and absolutely no damage has been done by the big army which was there. And for that, there is a concrete historical evidence, because the contemporary artist, using vegetable dye, painted this picture, a face-to-face encounter. He had a face, he could literally see Tipu Sultan face-to-face. He drew the picture of Tipu sitting on horseback, and the army camp, where all kinds of things are happening. People are selling chicken, buying chicken, and all that. So, of course, there is a later on there is a story around that, saying that the Saint Sebastian himself came in a dream and warned Tipu not to hurt the church or something. But anyway, Tipu has not touched this church. Now that looks very strange, and that picture is painted on the main wall of the church. And when I was an MA student in the Union Christian College, which our director mentioned in the beginning, where I was BA and MA student, we were taken to see this picture by our teachers, and that was a historically very, very valuable picture. But unfortunately, like it happens in many of these kind of institutions, the church committee itself destroyed it. I mean, they didn't want this picture there, so they whitewashed it. Unfortunately, now they are regretting it. Now they have got somebody else to paint it again, but that doesn't have the same kind of value the original picture had. But that picture itself is a historical document.
Matthew A. Varghese has the next query. Thank you very much for a very engaging presentation of such a significant document, Professor Tharagan. It is very interesting to read in this the continuous conflicts of control and ritual-based allegiances with respect to Portuguese power and Roman ecclesiastical order. But I wonder why these priests decided or even risked to move to Lisbon with the backdrop of a particular quote-unquote nationalist sentiment.
Yeah, that is exactly what is the most intriguing, in the sense that their idea of India was, of course, solid, and it had got further confirmed by the experience they had in Veerapandiyan Pattanam. But it has not been expressed in terms of national freedom or national self-rule, because there were still thinking in terms of the religion, and within that religion there are different factions, different groups, different even different churches following different kind of practices, and they would have been happy if they were granted freedom to exercise their own Eastern Christian or Chaldean or whatever you want to call it, kind of religious practices on their own, without interference by the foreign missionaries who followed a certain other kind of religious practices. They would have been happy with that. And you see that even when in an earlier period, when there was very severe conflict with regard to pepper prices and all that, because the Syrian Christians were mainly pepper traders, and the Portuguese who first came, they were pepper buyers. So they never agreed with each other completely. But even when they had such conflicts, that conflicts were submerged within the discussions of church practices, because the Portuguese believed in there was a time of the Reformation in which, of course, the Catholic Church lost number of their members to the different Protestant churches, and they were looking out for new members to join them. So they wanted the Syrian Christians to join them under their own format, but the Syrian Christians were reluctant to that. So they fought it out on that ground. And even some of their important meetings, like the Synod of Diamper, Udayam Perur Sunodos, he is really talking about these differences in practices. That seems to be the reason that's the only reason I can think of.
Thank you, sir. Srija Sridharan has the next query. Thank you for an insightful presentation. Can you share the details of the latest editions of Vartamana Pustakam, which are now available in market?
Which are
which are now available in the market?
Oh, there are the number of versions or books on Vartamana Pustakam, including one brought out by Professor Karthikeyan Nayar's Kerala Bhasha Institute in 2018, called Vartamana Pustakathinte Vartamanam by K.C. Varghese. There are some other studies, and I don't want to read out a bibliography, but most dependable, most rewarding works. One, of course, is Pius Malakandathil's 2013 paper on voices of dissent, early nationalism and Indian alternatives in European perceptions of church, published in a book by himself, published by Primus Books in Delhi. And then another book with which I am personally associated, but not mine, called Profiles of the Para-il Tarakan, Glimpses of the History of a Family, a Region, and a Church, by a person with my own initials and name, P.K.M. Tarakan, but that's my brother also. But that is his work, in which he has got a summary of the Vartamana Pustakam and a discussion of the different sources and different. So there are a number of books mentioned in that collection, of which I don't think there is anything, since the person who asked this question wants to know about Vartamana Pustakam itself, I don't think anything closer than 2018. That is the Kerala Language Institute publication. Otherwise, there are earlier books by Muthedan in 1977, Podipara in 1971. It is an English translation. These are, of course, Joseph Pulukundel has got a publication. I don't exactly know I think it is, I don't remember exactly the date. Then there is Matthew Ulagandara has written it in modern language. So these are the books that is available.
We have a message from Professor Pius Malakandathil that he ran out of charge in his telephone and he had to leave, and he sent a message of appreciation of the presentation, which I will share with you, sir. And there are messages from several others about the presentation itself, but not queries, but appreciative messages. And LRC Mount St. Thomas has has sent us a message. It again congratulates the presentation, and a few copies of Vartamana Pustakam Malayalam are available at LRC Publications, Mount St. Thomas, and they have given their phone number also. Thank you very much for sharing that information. LRC Publications has published 2 issues of the journals Thomas Christian Heritage, a study on Vartamana Pustakam 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'll be happy if you convey back to Pius Malakandathil my appreciation of his support. Appreciation.
I will, definitely, sir. And I will also share the messages with you via email.
And to everybody else who has
written. Yes. So we don't have any more queries. So Professor Karthikeyan, sir, would you like to comment?
Yes, sir. Anyway, it was a good presentation, sir. Because I have already gone through the Vartamana Pustakam when I published it in 2018, about which you have referred now. And I was specially interested in it because there was a mention about one martyr of Christianity in Travancore. There is one Devasahayam Pillai.
Yes.
A Nair Pillai, who later is converted to Christianity, was killed by the king on some doubts or suspicions, maybe political reasons. So about which I have to refer to in earlier versions. And when Professor Mr. K.C. Varghese approached me with a script of the book, I readily agreed to it because I was, as a student of history, I was interested in it, and so I had accepted it readily. And then, as you have already stated, there are several publishing houses brought out this book in different versions with and some of them, as you have pointed out, some of them may be interpolations.
Yes.
Because the book, they completed their journey. The 2 priests had completed their journey and came back in 1788 or so. But it was after, it was in 1789 that the French Revolution broke out.
Yes.
And it was only in 1719 that Napoleon came to power. And only after that, a little bit earlier, that Tipu joined the Gironde club and he had support from the French. So these may be interpolations. So we are not sure whether which one of these publications is the original version of the book written by our priest. That is a dubious thing. It is quite possible with regard to ancient text when interpolations are there. Anyway, it was a good presentation. I request all the participants to get a copy. If you can.
Can I make a?
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Professor Karthikeyan, I want to tell you that Thomas Paremmakkal died only in 1799, and he was the governor of the Archdiocese of Kodingalur. and he was in very much active till 1799. So he saw the rise to power by Napoleon Bonaparte, the French Revolution, etc., etc. So talking about these things may not be an interpolation. It could be an interpolation to the original version of the Vartamana Pustakam. That, of course, was must have been written in 1790, early 90. But he talks about the French Revolution and all that in his Bhuloga Shastram, where that could be a later.
Maybe he might have himself revised the text, original text.
But that also is doubtful, because the Bhuloga Shastram is not the language used in the earlier text. That is some experts language experts are saying. So it could be, you could have asked somebody else to write, probably dictating something.
Anyway, I request all Malayalam knowing participants or hearers of this seminar webinar to get a copy, any version, whether it is a State Language Institute's version or any other version of the book, because we will get a good picture of the situation in the 18th century Christianity and also the 18th century the world in those days. We can have a geographical view, the sojourn that they had made in the different parts of the world, and the words they used, the prose they used. This as a student of language, a student of linguistics can also will be maybe interested in these things. Anyway, I appreciate you, sir. Congratulate you. Thank you for on behalf of the KCHR. I appreciate you, even though you are the chairman. But this my duty, solemn duty. I think it is to congratulate you, and all. I express my deep gratitude to all the participants and also those people who had raised questions, interesting questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir,
Thank
in
you.
fact, I think after your discussion, there is a short query from CS Meenakshi. It is, what is Bhuloga Shastram about? Geography. It's a geography. So she needs a clarification about what Bhuloga Shastram is about.
You're going to say that? You're going to read it out?
The question is, what is
Bhuloga Shastram? Bhuloga
Shastram. That is, of course, a kind of a introduction to the countries which they visited. I hope that the need not have visited, but most of the countries in Europe which they came to know of. So it is almost like a kind of a it can't be called a geographical guide, but then it talks about these countries, and for instance, they talk about the French Academy. Probably the first mention of the French Academy in Malayalam might have been by Paramakel. He says that and then he says that if you see France, you have seen the whole Europe. I mean, Europe is the highest cultural epitome of European culture is France, and France has got an academy, and it describes the academy and such other sites which people from Kerala wouldn't have been able to see for themselves. So it's a kind of an introduction to these regions.
She has followed up. Where can I get the book?
Pardon?
CS Meenakshi has asked, where can I get the book?
I suppose that they can buy it from the Language Institute version. You can buy from their.
Sir, we have our bookshops in Ernakulam, Thrissur, Kozhikode, Kannur, Kottayam, and Trivandrum.
Okay, they got bookshops everywhere.
Anywhere you can have it.
Then, of course, this St. Thomas publications that you mentioned must be this Kakinad Museum.
Yes.
Where the original is kept. I think
they
you
have
can buy
given
it
their contact number also.
Yeah, sure. They can buy it from.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meenakshi.
So shall we wind up the session, sir?
Yes.
Of course, still we can wind up.
Thank you, Professor Michael
Thank you,
Karagan,
Professor
for that
Karthikeyan.
very engaging session, and a special thanks on behalf of the KCHR. A lecture by you has been in long planning, and we are very glad that it materialized now. Thank you, sir. Our next webinar is on the 24th of September. It's Sensory Histories, Public Formations of Sexuality in Kerala. It's by Dr. Navneeta Mukkil, Assistant Professor, Center for Women's Studies, JNU. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.